Who let this one? In the words came before he even looked up. Someone call the front desk. I think the cleaning crew sent their kid up by mistake. Marcus Webb said that, without bothering to turn around. He was standing at the reception counter of Hargrove Laine Capital Partners, flipping through a folder 37 floors above downtown Atlanta, Georgia. It was 7:58 in the morning. 12 people heard every syllable. Elijah Carter did not move. He stood near the elevator bank with a worn leather briefcase in his right hand, the kind of briefcase that had seen better decades, and he let the words land where they landed. "You talking to me?" His voice was even, not defiant, just even. Marcus Webb finally turned around. He was 51 years old, silver hair swept back with the precision of a man who had spent 2 decades being the most important person in whatever room he walked into. He looked Elijah up and down, the way you'd appraise something you weren't sure belonged on the shelf. "Finance intern?" Marcus said it like he was reading the wrong label on a package. "Yes, sir, Elijah Carter. Started today." Marcus's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You sure about that? Finance is a serious division. Not an after-school program." He picked up his coffee, black, still steaming from the cafe cart in the lobby, and walked past Elijah toward the hallway. And as he passed, without pausing, without looking, he tilted the cup, a slow, deliberate pour. Dark coffee spread across the front of Elijah's white button-down, soaking through the fabric. His mother had ironed for him the night before at their kitchen table in College Park, humming quietly to herself while he packed his briefcase. Marcus kept walking, he said, over his shoulder. "Now you look like you're in the right place." 12 people. Dead silence. Not a throat cleared. Not a single foot shifted. And here is what none of those 12 people knew. The kid standing in that lobby with coffee soaking into his shirt had a secret. Specific, irreversible, career-ending for Summian secret. And it was going to come out. Not that day, not even the next day, but it was coming. And when it did, nothing on that floor, not a title, not a corner office, not 18 years of built relationships, was going to stop it. Pay attention to the briefcase, it'll matter later. Elijah didn't go to the bathroom. He didn't call anyone. He stood in the lobby for a slow count of 8, feeling the coffee cool against his chest, and then he walked to the front desk and asked the receptionist, a young woman named Dana, who couldn't find a way to look him in the eye, for his intern welcome packet. She handed him a thin paper folder, 1 page, his name typed in the wrong font. She pointed down the west corridor. "Your workspace is at the end. Last door on the left." He followed the hallway. He passed a glass-walled suite, bright, open, 6 new monitors still wrapped in plastic, 6 welcome kits fanned out on a round table like a hotel turn-down service, a catered breakfast spread, a letter sealed in cream envelopes from senior leadership. He counted the chairs, 6 chairs, 5 interns, every single one of them white. One of them, a young woman named Claire Ashworth, looked up as Elijah passed. She saw the coffee stain. She saw the thin folder. She saw the gap between what he was holding and what sat on the table behind her. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked back at her screen. The last door on the left was not an office. It was a supply room. Mop in the corner, shelves of toner cartridges, a folding table pushed against the wall that someone had dusted off in a half-effort gesture of preparation. A single folding chair. The fluorescent light above buzzed at the frequency of something slowly dying. No computer. No welcome kit. No letter. No breakfast. Elijah stood in the doorway and looked at the room for a long time. His face gave you nothing. He walked in, set the worn briefcase on the folding table, sat down, opened it and took out his own laptop. A ThinkPad X250 he'd bought secondhand for $185 from a classmate at Morehouse. He connected to the guest Wi-Fi because nobody had given him the network password, and he started working. Not work anyone had assigned him, because nobody had assigned him anything. He pulled up Hargrove and Laine's last 4 quarterly filings from the SEC database, cross-referenced revenue by division against industry benchmarks, built a preliminary risk exposure audit, the kind of structural analysis that a mid-level analyst would take a full week to produce. Elijah had a working draft done before noon, 14 pages. Clean structure, 4 specific recommendations, each one cited to a line item in the public filings. Nobody checked on him. Nobody showed him where the restrooms were. Nobody brought him water. At noon, the other interns walked past his door, on the way to a welcome lunch in the West Conference Room. He could hear them laughing. He could hear Marcus Webb's voice, big and warm and full of performance, the kind of voice that fills a room because it was designed to fill rooms. Elijah ate a sandwich he'd packed in a Ziploc bag. Peanut butter and honey. The same thing he'd eaten every school day from 3rd grade through his senior year at Morehouse, because it traveled well and it cost 43 cents. His phone buzzed at 12:18. He picked it up. Something shifted in his face. Not a performance, not a mask falling, just a real thing, small and private, like light coming through a crack. He typed back, arrived safe, first day, love you, Dad. The contact was saved as Dad. No last name, no title. Nothing to indicate that the man on the other end of that message had built the company on whose guest Wi-Fi Elijah was currently sitting. But we're not there yet. Word travels differently in a corporate building than people admit. By early afternoon, Marcus Webb knew, via his shadow, a junior associate named Kyle Draper, who had the particular talent of delivering gossip with the energy of someone reporting a national emergency, that the kid from the lobby was still in the supply room. Still there. Still working. Marcus didn't like that. He's still here? Marcus didn't look up from his monitor, on his own laptop. I walked past twice. He's pulling our public filings, building something, a pause, the kind that isn't really a pause. Marcus picked up his desk phone and dialed facilities. He requested the supply room workspace be relocated, not improved, relocated, to the corner near the service corridor on the east side of the floor. Then he called the conference room coordinator and had Elijah's name removed from the afternoon briefing schedule, the intern orientation session, the handbook, section 3. 1 required all new interns to attend without exception. At 3 o'clock, Elijah watched through his cracked door as the 5 other interns filed into conference room C. Laptops open, notebooks ready. Marcus at the whiteboard, drawing org charts with the kind of sweeping confidence that makes people believe the person drawing them built the organization himself. Kyle Draper in the front row nodding on a 4-second loop. Elijah stood up, straightened his coffee-stained shirt, walked to the conference room. Claire Ashworth was just coming out of the restroom, heading for the same door. She saw him. Her pace slowed almost imperceptibly. Her eyes went to the stain on his collar, then to the conference room, then back to him. Is this the orientation briefing? Elijah asked. Simple, polite. Claire looked at the room, at Marcus, at the 6 chairs and the one that was set for 5. Then she walked past Elijah without answering and took her seat. She didn't slam a door, or raise a voice, or do anything dramatic. She just kept moving, which somehow was worse. Elijah stood at that door for 4 full seconds. Inside, Marcus glanced up, registered Elijah's presence, and turned back to the whiteboard the way you turn away from something that has no bearing on your afternoon. Not hostility, dismissal, the far more efficient weapon. Elijah went back to the supply room, sat down, opened his laptop, and found the intern handbook in the company portal. Section 3. 1. All interns shall attend mandatory orientation sessions during their first week of employment, without exception, regardless of division placement. He took a screenshot, saved it to a folder he'd created that morning, and labeled simply Records. That folder already had 3 things in it: the handbook screenshot, a photo of the supply room with the mop bucket and flickering light, and a time-stamped photo of his own shirt taken in the elevator at 8:04 a.m. Nobody knew that folder existed. It would matter. At 5 o'clock, Elijah formatted his audit document, wrote a professional cover email, subject, Preliminary Risk Assessment, Q3-Q4 Exposure Analysis, E. Carter, Finance Intern, attached the PDF and sent it to Marcus Webb. At 5:14 p.m., Marcus opened it, read the first 3 pages. His face changed in the way a face changes. When it encounters something that directly contradicts a story, it has already decided to believe. He closed the document. He clicked Reply All, copied the full finance division, 43 recipients, and typed, Team. A reminder that interns are not authorized to conduct unsolicited research or submit reports outside of assigned deliverables. Let's maintain professional protocols. MW. 43 people received that email. 43 people understood exactly who it was directed at. Not one replied. Elijah's laptop chimed. He read the email. Read it again. You would not have seen his face change. But if you had been in that supply room with him, you would have heard the sound of his left thumb pressing into the edge of the folding table, pressing until it hurt, pressing like he was holding something in place. He sat in that room with the buzzing light, while the rest of the floor packed up and went home. And for the first time since the morning, a voice in his head, tired, honest, quiet, said what it had been waiting all day to say. Call Dad. 1 call, 30 seconds. And by dinner, all of this is over. He picked up the phone, opened the contact, stared at the name. Then he put it back in his pocket. Not yet. Day 2. Elijah showed up in a fresh white shirt. He'd hand-washed the stained one in his apartment sink at 11:30 the night before, draped it over the shower rod to dry, ironed the replacement at 6 in the morning by the window, with the broken blind that let the early Atlanta light in sideways. Same navy jacket, same second-hand briefcase. Marcus Webb was in performance mode. 3 executives from a mid-sized investment firm based in Charlotte had come in for a partnership walkthrough. The kind of meeting that gets catered and rehearsed, where every senior leader shows up 8 minutes early and tries to look like they're always 8 minutes early. Marcus was the host. Big energy, big handshake, walking the clients through the floor like he'd poured the foundation himself. Elijah was at the water station near the copy room, refilling his bottle, making himself invisible the way 2 days in that building had taught him to do. Marcus came around the corner with the clients, 4 associates trailing, Kyle Draper at his right shoulder. 9 people total. And Marcus saw Elijah, and something moved behind his eyes that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite amusement. It was the expression of a man who has just noticed an opportunity. Carter. Performance voice. Client voice. The volume calculated to reach every corner of the corridor. Perfect timing. I need you to run down to the lobby and pick up the dry cleaning I left at the reception desk this morning, then swing by the catering cart and get a fresh setup for conference room B. Think you can manage that? He said it with the warmth of a man who genuinely believes he is doing someone a favor by giving them a task. Elijah set down his water bottle. Mr. Webb, I'm a finance intern. I'm happy to support any work within the division, but I don't think errand runs fall under. Errand runs. Marcus turned to the clients with a performance grin, the kind that makes a crowd feel included in a joke at someone else's expense. You hear that? 2 days in, and he's reviewing his job description. Light laughter from one of the clients. Uncomfortable quiet from the other 2. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that Elijah could smell the espresso on his breath. Let me make something simple for you, Carter. His voice dropped but didn't disappear. Everyone in that circle heard every word. I decide what you do here. I decide what you are here. He reached across to the catering tray beside the water station, picked up a coffee cup, full, hot, still steaming. He turned back to Elijah, and slowly, with the deliberateness of a man who wants gesture to register, he pressed the cup into Elijah's hands, wrapped his fingers around it, one by one, like a demonstration. Your job today is to hold this, carry what I tell you to carry, and keep your voice to a professional minimum. That sound reasonable to you? Or should I find smaller words? Kyle Draper made a sound that was not quite a laugh but was designed to function as one. 9 people in that hallway. Not one of them spoke. Except one person who wasn't in the hallway. A woman named Sandra Reeves, a senior compliance analyst who had been with Hargrove and Laine for 7 years, who had come around the corner from the copy room and stopped just outside the circle. She stood there holding a manila folder, listening. Her knuckles had gone white around the edges of it. She had seen this before. Not with Elijah. With a junior analyst named Deshaun Morley, 3 years ago, who had filed a grievance and been reassigned to a satellite office in Marietta within 6 weeks. With a paralegal named Vanessa Odom, 2 summers before that, who had simply not returned after Labor Day weekend, and whose desk had been quietly cleared without announcement. Sandra stood there with her folder. She didn't say anything. She told herself it wasn't the right moment. She had a review coming up. She had 2 kids in middle school. She had reasons. Elijah looked down at the coffee cup in his hands, steam rising between his fingers. He held it for 3 full seconds. Then he set it down, gently, precisely, without a word. Placed it back on the tray the way you place down something that was never yours to hold. He looked at Marcus Webb for one long beat, said nothing, turned, and walked back toward the east corridor. The hallway stayed quiet behind him. Marcus shrugged at the clients. Fresh talent, he said, takes time to break them in. He smiled. The clients did not smile back. Sandra Reeves watched the corridor after Elijah disappeared into it. She looked at her folder. She looked at her hands. She was still shaking. She didn't know when that had started. In her bottom desk drawer, under an old performance review and 2 years of meeting minutes, sat a black leather notebook where she'd been keeping track of things for 3 years. Dates, descriptions, names. Things she had watched and documented and told herself would matter someday. This time, for the first time, she didn't go back to her desk and add a new line to the notebook. She walked to the supply room at the end of the east corridor. Left Elijah's welcome kit, the one that had been sitting on her credenza for 2 days, the one she'd picked up from reception meaning to deliver, on the floor outside his door. She didn't knock. She didn't speak. She turned and walked away. She had been watching for 7 years. She'd stayed quiet for 7 years. But standing in that east corridor, hearing the sound of a 23-year-old man working alone in a storage room with no computer and no window and no acknowledgement that he existed, she felt something move in her chest that she hadn't felt move in a very long time. It wasn't courage, not yet. But it was what comes just before courage. And it was enough to make her go home that evening, find her notebook, and read every entry from the beginning. The next morning, Elijah made a decision. He wasn't going to wait. Not for the room to change, not for someone to notice, not for the conditions to improve. He had seen enough to understand that conditions do not improve on their own in buildings, where a man can pour coffee on an intern in a lobby full of witnesses and walk away whistling. He took the elevator down to the 24th floor, legal and compliance. Raymond Okafor's name was on the door. General counsel, 7 years at Hargrove Laine, Howard University Law, framed on the wall above a family photo taken at what looked like a graduation ceremony. A woman in academic robes, 2 kids holding balloons. A coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Lawyer," in faded block letters. Raymond was 54. He had a quiet face and the kind of stillness that comes from having been in rooms where things went very wrong and having learned over many years how to be the person in that room who didn't panic. Elijah sat down across from him, and for the first time since walking into Hargrove and Laine, he told the full story. He told it the way he'd built the audit: facts, sequence, documentation. The lobby comment. The coffee poured on his shirt in front of 12 people. The supply room with the mop bucket. The intern suite 20 feet away with 6 welcome kits and 5 white interns. The orientation session he'd been deliberately excluded from in violation of Section 3. 1. The reply-all email that had publicly humiliated him in front of 43 colleagues. The coffee cup pressed into his hands in front of clients. The words, "Keep your voice to a professional minimum." He laid it down piece by piece like items placed on a table. Raymond listened. He didn't interrupt. His pen moved steadily across a yellow legal pad. When Elijah finished, Raymond set the pen down. He leaned back. He took a slow breath through his nose. "Elijah, I hear you. What you're describing is serious, and I want you to know I'm treating it that way." He paused. "Give me 48 hours. I'll investigate personally and follow up directly." He stood, extended his hand. Elijah shook it. Raymond gripped with both hands, the way older men grip younger men's hands when a promise is being made. Elijah walked out. Raymond sat motionless for a long time looking at the legal pad. Elijah's words in his own handwriting. Then he picked up his cell phone, not the desk line, and made a call. "Marcus," he said. "It's Raymond. Your new intern just left my office. He's filing a formal complaint. Coffee incident, the orientation exclusion, the client walkthrough yesterday. He documented all of it." A pause. "I think you need to know the scope of what he brought in." The line was quiet. Then Marcus laughed. Not a nervous laugh. The laugh of a man who has been at the top of the food chain so long that the concept of consequence has become theoretical. "Raymond, come on. You're going to take the word of a kid who's been here 3 days over mine? I sit on the compensation board. I have a direct line to 4 of our 7 managing partners. You want to go down this road over an intern?" Another pause. Raymond stared at the legal pad, at Elijah's words. He picked up his pen, drew one slow line through the top of the page, and in the margin wrote, "Informal feedback. No action at this time." "We're fine, Marcus," he said. "I'll handle it." He put the phone in his jacket pocket and sat very still for 47 seconds. Then he opened the bottom drawer, placed the legal pad inside, and closed it. By noon, Marcus had shifted from defense to something more practiced. He showed up at the intern lunch. First time in 5 years, according to Kyle Draper's institutional memory. Bought the table a round of coffees. Asked about schools and internship goals. Made everyone feel seen and chosen, and like they were the lucky ones. And somewhere in the middle of it, casual, regretful, the tone of a man delivering news he wished he didn't have, he slipped in what he'd come to deliver. "Listen, I hate talking about colleagues behind their backs, but the Carter kid, there's something off. Sent me an unsolicited 18-page report on day 1, like he's trying to show the entire division up before he's learned where the supply closet is. Goes to legal on day 3. That's not drive. That's a chip on his shoulder." Kyle Draper on cue leaned in. "I heard he was already making waves with facilities, too." Marcus nodded slowly, the practiced sadness of a man performing concern. "I've been in this industry 22 years. I know the type. High maintenance, low output. My honest advice? Don't get pulled into his orbit. Keep your head down. Do your work." By 1:30, the other interns had stopped making eye contact with Elijah in the hallway. Claire Ashworth, who had looked at his coffee-stained collar through the glass on day 1 and said nothing, now crossed to the opposite side of the corridor when she saw him coming. The herd had turned, every single one. Marcus had Elijah relocated again, not back to the supply room, further. Past the supply room, past the copy station, into a dead-end corner, behind a bank of filing cabinets near the service elevator. The kind of spot where you put things you don't want anyone to accidentally notice. Elijah sat there at 12:40 with his Ziploc bag sandwich, the service elevator humming behind him, the sound of people laughing somewhere on the other side of the floor, living a version of this job that he was supposed to be living. He took out his phone, opened contacts. His thumb hovered over the green button next to Dad. 1 second. 3. 7. He could see it. 1 ring. 2. The warm, deep voice that had read him bedtime stories and taught him the Windsor knot and said, "The night before this internship started, you're going to be just fine, son." I've always known that. 1 call. And by dinner, the supply room and the filing cabinets and the coffee and all of it would be a story he was telling, not living. He put the phone in his pocket. Not yet. While Elijah sat in that corner, something was happening on the 32nd floor of the same building that nobody on the 37th knew about yet. The corner office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows facing east toward the Buckhead skyline. The one that had been locked and dark for 6 weeks while its occupant was traveling through Dallas, Seattle, and New York for the merger negotiations. That office was being prepared. The executive assistant had arrived at 7 that morning. Fresh flowers on the sideboard. A bottle of still water and a crystal glass aligned precisely with the edge of the leather desk pad. On the desk, positioned so it would be the first thing he saw when he sat down, was a framed photograph. A tall black man with silver-gray temples, arm around a young man in a Morehouse sweatshirt. Both of them laughing the way people laugh when they're not performing happiness but actually inside it. The nameplate on the door read, Gerald Carter, founder and managing principal. But that's a detail we'll come back to. Day 3, 2:40 in the afternoon. A black car pulled up to the main entrance of the Hargrove Laine building on Peachtree Street. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door, and a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out onto the sidewalk. Gerald Carter. 61 years old, silver temples, the posture of a man who built something from nothing and never forgot what nothing felt like. He had named the firm Hargrove Laine after the 2 addresses where he'd worked his first jobs in Atlanta. One as a janitor, one as a mail clerk, because he wanted the building's name to carry the memory of the people who cleaned it and sorted its packages before they ever got to run it. He had been gone 6 weeks. He'd told no one he was coming back today. No email. No announcement. He simply walked in through the front entrance, nodded at the security desk, and took the elevator. Word moves differently in a building when its founder walks in unannounced. By the time Gerald stepped off the elevator on the 37th floor, the atmosphere had already changed. Postures straightening, personal tabs closing, voices dropping to a more professional register. Marcus Webb reached him first. Big handshake, big smile, the full performance. Gerald. Welcome back. Floor's been running well. Client pipeline is strong. New intern class is excellent. Best group I've seen in years. Gerald shook his hand. Warm but measured. Good to hear. I want to walk the floor. Meet the new faces, absolutely. Let me take you to the intern suite. Marcus led Gerald to the glass-walled room. 5 interns, 5 laptops, 5 welcome kits. They stood when the founder walked in. Gerald shook each hand, asked each name, asked each school, asked what they were working on. He listened to the answers. He wasn't performing listening, he was actually doing it. Marcus narrated from behind. Claire here is from Emory, top of her program. And over here, we have Tyler already making contributions to the Northgate analysis. Gerald smiled, nodded. Then paused. He looked around the room carefully. Marcus. I pulled the intake list on the flight back. There are 6 names on it. The temperature in the glass room dropped 10 degrees. Marcus didn't miss a beat. Oh, the 6th is around. Still getting oriented. New kid taking some time to find his rhythm. Gerald's expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes did. The shift of a man who has heard something that doesn't align with a story he's already cross-referencing. Where is he? I'm sure he's close by. Why don't we head to the client lounge? The Northgate team is. Marcus, still warm, but no longer a suggestion. Where is the sixth intern? A pause. East corridor, temporary space situation. I had him set up near the... Gerald was already walking. He moved through the floor with the calm of a man who knows every hallway because he designed the layout himself. Past the conference rooms, past the break room, past the glass walls and the bright lighting and the open collaborative spaces, into the back section. The one that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and recycled air, past the copy station, around the bank of filing cabinets. And he stopped. There, behind the filing cabinets, next to the service elevator, at a folding table, under a fluorescent light that buzzed with the irregular rhythm of something that had been ignored for too long, sat Elijah Carter, alone, working on a second-hand ThinkPad, a Ziploc bag crumpled beside him. No company equipment, no welcome kit, no human being within 30 feet. A worn leather briefcase on the floor beside his chair. Elijah looked up. Gerald looked at him. The hallway went completely still. Marcus stopped talking. Kyle Draper, who had followed at a distance out of some instinct he couldn't name, froze in the doorway. Sandra Reeves, who had been trailing the situation from the edges for 3 days, with her notebook and her silence, stood at the far end of the corridor, her hands still. Gerald crossed the hallway, slow steps, deliberate. His eyes never moved from his son's face. When he reached the folding table, he didn't look at the filing cabinets or the service elevator or the buzzing light. He looked at his son, and then he opened his arms and said it. Steady, quiet, carrying the full weight of a man who has arrived too late to stop something, but is not too late to witness it. Loud enough for every person in that corridor to hear. Elijah.
Stand up and let me look at you.
Elijah stood, and for the first time in 3 days, not when the coffee hit his shirt, not when the reply all email chimed on his laptop, not when the cup was pressed into his hands in front of clients, his composure broke. Not into anger, not into tears, into relief. The kind of relief that floods a chest when someone who loves you finally sees exactly where you've been. They held each other. Not a corporate greeting, a father and a son. Gerald's hands on Elijah's shoulders, pulling back, looking at his face, reading 3 days of silence in it. You okay? Gerald's voice, close and low. Elijah nodded.
I'm okay, Dad.
Marcus Webb's face had gone the specific color of a man who, in a single irreversible second, understands that the floor beneath his entire career has just opened. He opened his mouth. Gerald. I had absolutely no idea he was. I didn't know that he was your... Gerald didn't turn around. Not yet. He was still looking at his son, still holding his shoulders, still reading what was written in Elijah's face. Then slowly, Gerald turned. He looked at the folding table, the mop bucket visible through the open supply room door, the filing cabinets arranged to block the corner from view, the flickering light, the Ziploc bag, the second-hand laptop. He looked at all of it with the careful, quiet attention of a man building a complete picture. Then he looked at Marcus. Why is my intern sitting next to a freight elevator? Marcus's mouth moved. There was a space issue. Temporary. I was planning to address it. Marcus, one word. Final, he turned to the corridor. Conference room A. Everyone. Sandra Reeves stepped forward. Her heels clicked once on the tile. Everyone turned. Her voice was thinner than she would have liked, but it was present. Mr. Carter, there are things you need to know. Not just about the last 3 days. Gerald looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you, he said, and I'm listening. Conference room A glass on 3 sides. The entire 37th floor could see in, and they did. Gerald sat at the head of the table. He didn't rush, didn't raise his voice. He folded his hands and waited until every chair was filled. To his left, Elijah, still in the navy jacket with the coffee stain on the collar, still carrying 3 days of silence in his posture. To his right, Marcus Webb, jaw set, already composing his defense. Across the table, Raymond Okafor from legal, the yellow legal pad in front of him, with one line drawn through the top. Sandra Reeves, gripping the armrests of her chair with both hands, the black notebook on the table in front of her. Kyle Draper, leg bouncing. 2 managing partners who had been reached by phone and arrived still buttoning their jackets. Beyond the glass, the entire floor standing at their desks, leaning against doors, watching. Gerald spoke first. Elijah. Tell me about the last 3 days. Elijah didn't look at Marcus. He looked at Gerald, not as a son, as an employee reporting to the head of his company. He started from the beginning, the lobby. The words before the coffee was poured. The coffee. The supply room. The 5 other interns with equipment and kits, and welcome letters and him. The orientation session he'd been removed from. The reply-all email. The cup placed in his hands in front of clients. The words spoken in that corridor that everyone had heard and no one had answered. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't editorialize. He laid it down. When he finished, the room was quiet enough to hear the ventilation system. Gerald turned to Sandra, Miss Reeves. Sandra opened her notebook. She didn't just tell Elijah's story. She told the story of the 3 years before it. Deshaun Morley, the junior analyst who filed a grievance and found himself relocated to a satellite office within 6 weeks. Vanessa Odom, the paralegal who cleared her own desk over a Labor Day weekend and never came back. A compliance associate named Marcus had called too sensitive in a team meeting, who transferred out within a month. Dates, incidents, witnesses, all of it in the notebook she had been keeping and not using. Her voice cracked once. She didn't stop. It's a pattern, Mr. Carter. It has been a pattern. Everyone on this floor knew. We chose not to say anything because we calculated that staying quiet was safer than speaking up. She didn't look at Marcus when she said it. She looked at Gerald. Gerald let her words stand. Then he turned to Raymond. Raymond. Did Elijah file a formal complaint with you? Raymond looked at the yellow legal pad. The line through the top of the page was visible from across the table. Yes, sir. What did you do with it? The room held very still. I downgraded it to an informal feedback memo. No action required. Raymond's voice had dropped to the register of a man delivering a verdict about himself. I did that because Marcus reminded me that he sits on the compensation board that reviews my department's budget. I made a calculation about my own position, and I got it wrong. I failed this intern, and I failed the obligation of this office. He looked at Elijah. I'm sorry. Gerald nodded, not in forgiveness, in acknowledgement. He turned to Kyle Draper. Mr. Draper, you were present in the corridor when Mr. Webb placed a coffee cup in my son's hands and told him to, as I understand it, keep your voice to a professional minimum. Is that accurate? Kyle's knee stopped bouncing. I was there, yes. Did you say anything? A pause. Kyle's face answered before his words could. No, sir. Gerald looked at Marcus. Marcus was already leaning forward. The posture of a man who has spent a career recovering from rooms like this one, who has learned that the first person to speak with confidence shapes the narrative. Gerald, I want to be completely honest with you. I was hard on him, yes, maybe too hard. But this firm has a standard of excellence that doesn't come from coddling people on day one. What you're seeing here is Marcus. Gerald's voice did not rise, it lowered, which was worse. I built this firm on one principle. Every person who walks through that door gets treated with dignity, not because of who their father is, not because of what they look like, because they showed up, because they earned their seat, and because it is our responsibility to develop them, not dismantle them. He leaned forward slightly.
You didn't disrespect my son.
You disrespected every person in this building who has ever stayed quiet about something they witnessed because they were afraid of what speaking up would cost them. You built that fear, Marcus. 18 years of it, and that ends today, he stood. Marcus Webb, you are terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Your severance arrangement is contingent on a signed non-disparagement and non-retaliation agreement. If you contact any current employee of this firm outside of formal legal channels, the agreement is void. Marcus's mouth fell open. Gerald, you cannot seriously be. I just did. Marcus sat completely still for a long moment. Then something happened that nobody in the room had expected. The defiance in his face didn't collapse. It cracked. Slowly. Like a wall that has been taking pressure for years and finally finds the one load it cannot distribute. He looked at the table. He looked at the yellow legal pad. He looked at Sandra's open notebook. He looked at Elijah. His voice came out stripped of its performance register. Just a man's voice. Smaller than anyone in that room had ever heard it. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have the words yet, but the look on his face was something nobody would forget. Not the shock of a man caught. The slow, nauseating recognition of a man who has just finally understood what he has been doing, and to whom, and for how long. Security arrived. 2 officers, professional, quiet. They stood at the door. Marcus picked up his phone, his key card, and walked out without another word. Nobody watched him go with respect. That was the change that registered most clearly on the floor. Not the departure, but the quality of the silence it left behind. Gerald turned to the room. To Raymond, every HR and legal complaint filed in the past 4 years will be audited by an independent firm. You keep your position conditionally on the outcome of that audit and one condition. You never make that calculation again. If you're not sure whether to prioritize someone's budget or someone's dignity, the answer is always dignity. Always. Raymond nodded. Yes, sir. To Kyle Draper, 90-day probationary period. Mandatory professional conduct and workplace ethics training, 1 incident. 1. Kyle stared at the table. To Sandra Reeves. What you did today took more than 3 years of courage to build. And I know that. I'm forming an independent internal review board that reports directly to the board of directors, not to any department head. I'd like you to chair it if you're willing. Sandra's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together, nodded. Gerald looked through the glass at the floor beyond. The people at their desks and in the doorways. He didn't address them. Every word had traveled through the glass as if it weren't there. Then it was just the 2 of them. Father and son, glass walls, empty chairs. Gerald sat back down. The authority, the steadiness, the measured control of the last hour, it didn't vanish. It just moved aside to make room for something else. He looked at Elijah's collar. The faint coffee stain still visible on the fabric his mother had ironed at their kitchen table 3 days ago. He looked at the worn briefcase on the floor beside Elijah's chair, the one he'd given Elijah when he left for Morehouse, the one that had once belonged to Gerald's own father, a maintenance supervisor at a hospital in Macon, who'd carried it to every day of work for 19 years, and never been asked his opinion about anything inside it. Gerald's jaw tightened. His voice came out quieter than anything he'd said all afternoon.
Why didn't you call me?
Elijah looked at his hands for a moment, then at his father. Because I needed to know. Know what? That I could stand in a room with a man like that and still be myself. Without your name behind me, without anyone in this building knowing whose son I am. He paused. Just me, Dad. I needed to know if just me was enough. Gerald stared at his son for a long time. Something moved in his face that he didn't try to stop. And Elijah looked up, and I know. Gerald reached across the table and took his son's hand. Not a handshake, a hold. The kind a father gives when there are 100 things to say, and only enough weight for one. Elijah, he said, I have known since you were 11 years old. They sat there for a while. The building hummed around them. The late afternoon light came in long and low through the east-facing glass. Elijah had been working in a corner with no windows for 3 days. This was the first Atlanta skyline he'd seen since he arrived. In the weeks that followed, Gerald Carter changed things. Not with speeches, not with internal communications drafted by legal. He changed the infrastructure. Every intern starting immediately received identical onboarding. Same workspace, same equipment, same access to company systems, same welcome materials. 2-person verification checklist on day 1, non-negotiable. The checklist was named after nobody. It just existed and was enforced. An independent whistleblower hotline was established through an outside firm. Not routed through legal, not reviewed by any department head, reporting directly and only to the independent board members. The hotline had been under development for 4 years. It went live within 2 weeks. The audit of past complaints produced findings that Gerald did not discuss publicly, but acted on quietly. 2 settlements. 1 formal letter of censure to a managing partner, 1 position elimination that the official announcement described as a restructuring. 3 weeks after Marcus Webb's termination, Gerald made 1 phone call from his home, Sunday evening. Marcus. It's Gerald, a long silence. Then, what do you want? I want to offer you something. There's an executive coaching program, leadership and ethics, 12 weeks, the best facilitators in the field. I'll cover the cost. Silence. Why would you do that? Because I watched you build relationships with clients over 18 years that took real skill. Because I believe people can change when they stop defending and start looking. But that's your choice, Marcus. I'm not calling to convince you. I'm calling to leave the door open. A very long pause. Marcus said, I'll think about it. Gerald said, that's all I'm asking. He hung up. No follow-up. No pressure. Because a door is a door. You can build it, you can open it, but you cannot make anyone walk through. 8 weeks later, Elijah Carter completed his internship. His performance review was conducted by a 3-person panel, none of whom had been informed that his last name was the same as the name on the building's founding documents. He received a full-time offer. His first project as a permanent employee, redesigning the firm's intern onboarding program, every element. The workspace assignment, the first day walkthrough, the mentorship pairing, the orientation schedule, the welcome letter. He built it from scratch because nobody in that company understood more completely than he did what it feels like when the system fails a person before they've even had the chance to show who they are. On his first official morning as a full employee, Elijah walked into the building on Peachtree Street. Same lobby, same elevator, same floor where a man had poured coffee on his shirt and told him he didn't belong. Sandra Reeves was waiting by the coffee station near the east corridor. She smiled, held out a cup. Welcome back, Elijah. He took it. They looked at each other, and everything that had happened between that first morning and this one passed between them in the space of a breath. Elijah took a sip. Good coffee, he said. Sandra laughed, a real one. He walked toward the window. The Atlanta skyline sat clear and wide in the morning light. He looked at it for a long moment, the worn briefcase in his hand, his father's briefcase, the one that had been to 19 years of work and never once been asked its opinion. Then he set it down at his desk, opened his laptop, and started building. That story is fiction. The names, the company, the building, all made up. But what Elijah carried in that supply room? The silence of a room full of people who saw everything and calculated their way into doing nothing. That isn't fiction. According to the EEOC, more than 67,000 workplace discrimination charges were filed in the United States last year alone. And those are only the ones that made it to paper. For every person who stayed, there are hundreds who quietly cleared their desk and left without saying why. Marcus Webb didn't lose his career because Allah was the founder's son. He lost it because he treated a human being like he was less than one, and an entire floor let it happen and kept the math running on what it would cost them to say something. So here's the question. Not about Elijah. About you. The next time you're in that hallway, the next time someone pours the coffee and 12 people go silent, which one are you going to be? The one who pours it? The 12 who watch? Or the one who finally steps forward? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story reached something in you, not because of the ending, but because you recognized someone in it, share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not invisible. And subscribe, because next week we're telling another story that doesn't get told enough. You don't have to be the founder's son to change the room. You just have to decide that you're not going to be one of the 12.